Hey folks, in this video, let's talk about a thorn in India's growth story. There is something that's holding India back, which, if left ignored, will knock India off its growth trajectory. First, the good news India has done okay in the last 10 odd years. By the end of 2025, India is on course to become the world's fourth largest economy, which means India's nominal GDP has doubled between 2014 and 2025 from being 10th largest economy in the world in 2014 to rise to fourth largest in 2025 is noteworthy. Also, between 1990 and 2023, India's real GDP growth rate on average was above nations such as United States, Germany, and Japan. So, what has worked? A stable political setup at the center since 2014 has been beneficial in ensuring policy continuity and building global confidence in the Indian economy. It has ensured a moderate inflation regime and fiscal discipline, which is reflected in the falling fiscal deficit numbers. At the same time, fiscal discipline has been accompanied by effective and calibrated social welfare spending. Digitalization made social welfare spending effective through direct benefit transfer. We can point to more policy reforms such as goods and services tax and insolvency and bankruptcy code. Investment in infrastructure is visible through expanding road network, railways, energy, and defense. IBC has improved the health of the Indian banking sector, so on and so forth. These are some of the things that have worked, but there is also a more sobering picture of the Indian economy. Even as the world's fourth largest economy, India's GDP per capita is somewhere around $3,000 only. It has doubled in the last 10 odd years, but based on this metric, India does not even feature in top 100 nations. Even if you look at GDP per capita on purchasing power parity basis, amongst the top 10 economies in the world by size, India is the weakest. About 90% of India's workforce is employed in the informal sector. Female workforce participation rate is abysmally low at 26% against the global average of 47%. And the thorn in India's growth story that I want to talk about is this: manufacturing sector as a share of India's GDP is somewhere around 13%. Is that bad? Yes. And here is why. David Waldron, an independent economist, talks about a phenomenon that most nations go through as they economically progress. He talks about three sectors and how they evolve as nations develop. The three sectors are agriculture, manufacturing, and services. On this graphic, you can see three nations: US, South Korea, and China. US and South Korea are developed nations. China is well on its way to get there. Now, look at agriculture column. You can see as nations develop, the share of agriculture in the GDP falls. Along with it, the share of workers employed in agriculture sector also falls. So in case of the US, less than 5% of total workers are employed in agriculture, lowest among the three nations. But their output per worker is over $80,000, highest among the three nations. South Korea is following the same path, and China looks like it's on the same path as well. In China, still over 30% of the workers are employed in agriculture, but their output per worker is well below where US and South Korea stand. It makes sense. As nations develop, more automation or mechanization takes place in agriculture, thus enabling more food production with fewer workers. Now, look at the services column. As nations get wealthier, demand shifts towards services such as healthcare, education, entertainment, tourism, leisure, and so on. Therefore, services sector's share increases continuously throughout a nation's growth journey. Not only does the share of employment rise, but output per worker rises as well. You can see the three nations follow the same path with a little time lag. Finally, look at the manufacturing column. The trend you see in case of the United States is likely going to repeat in South Korea and then China. As nation develops, manufacturing's share increases initially, and once productivity or output per worker exceeds around $40,000, it starts to drop. It has happened in the United States and South Korea. China will soon reach a point where its manufacturing may suffer the same fate. See, American manufacturing peaked in the 1940s. Since then, it has been on a decline. In South Korea, manufacturing peaked in 1990. Also, notice even though manufacturing's share drops after a point, output per worker keeps on rising. This is similar to what happens in agriculture. As nations develop, they move away from low value add, labor intensive manufacturing to high skill, high value add manufacturing that is heavily dependent on complex technology. This is why we see high end chip manufacturing being dominated by Taiwan, a developed nation. Netherlands is dominating in making chip lithography machines, another developed nations. The United States is the leader in making commercial airplanes, jet engines, and best defense equipment in the world. We can see how manufacturing evolves as nations develop. This is the problem in case of India. Back to the thorn in India's growth story. Manufacturing as a share of its GDP is at just 13%. It needs to be 25%, 30%. But India is just not able to demonstrate competitiveness in this particular sector. This is where India is likely to get a large number of well paying jobs it badly needs. If India's manufacturing does not rise, it will not follow the pattern we just saw, which means the nation may not end up becoming a developed nation. To fix this problem, experts and economists prescribe multitude of reforms that you can see on the screens. There are some aimed at agriculture as well, but to me, labor reforms, skilling the workforce, and judicial reform appear to be the high priority ones. I hope you found this analysis interesting. I'll speak with you again next week. Until then, take care.